Good evening. I would like to call to order the Tuesday, whatever today is, December 16th meeting of the Monmouth City Council and ask Phyllis for the roll call, please.
Councillor Belts. Here. Councillor Carey.
Here.
Councillor Lopez.
Present.
Councillor McKeel. Here. Councillor Oberst.
Here.
Councillor Ridgway.
Here.
Mayor Kuntz.
I am here and I will lead us in the flag salute this evening. That brings us to our consent calendar. One item in there were the minutes of the council meeting of December 2nd. Any additions, corrections, or we'll get the motion going?
Move approval. Second.
Thank you, Councillor Oberst, for the motion and Councillor Lopez for the second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And hearing none opposed. At this time would be time for public comments for items not on the agenda. And I know we have one public comment later on during the work session. Do we have anything else?
I have received no public comments, Mayor Kuntz.
Thank you, City Recorder Bowman. That then brings us directly to our work session item. So I will call our Community and Economic Development Director, Suzanne Duffner, up for a report. I know it came fast tonight.
I know it did. Sorry, I wasn't quite ready for it to happen that fast. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I am Suzanne Duffner, the City Community and Economic Development Director, here to present the staff report tonight for the work session. So this is kind of the long-awaited UGB land exchange. Just starting off the process with the work session, the council's already initiated this legislative amendment last November. So this is really just to get into some more of the details of the proposal and talk those through a little bit about the process. So this is consistent with your strategic goals. Goal 3, the housing strategy 3.3, investigating the feasibility of completing a UGB land swap to increase the supply of buildable land inside the city limits. So I just want to make sure to point that out. It's exciting to be doing some work that were part of the council goals. The legislature did approve House Bill 2647. This authorized the city to complete an expedited UGB land exchange, a land swap, as we know it more commonly, to exchange 90 acres that would be removed from the city UGB and bring in up to 75 net acres land zoned for residential use, subject to meeting certain requirements. And this bill really came from some of this specific issues that Monmouth is having with our constrained land supply and being able to meet our housing production targets. So removing land that for whatever reason, for natural resources, unwilling landowners to annex that property, some issues with being able to serve it with city services and bring in land that can actually be annexed and developed in a more timely fashion. So the House bill outlines some specific criteria that we must meet for land that is being brought in. I already mentioned the acreage requirement. It must also be contiguous, of course, to our boundary and the city, so it can be city limits, so it can be annexed. There are some requirements for how much of the land can be in a mapped floodplain or wetland environmentally constrained property. We don't want to be bringing in a lot more land that's going to have those further constraints to being able to produce more housing on it. So there's a 25% threshold of how much of it can be, of the land brought in that can be within an environmentally constrained area. Must be able to connect to nearby city water and sewer services. Those are the infrastructure costs of being able to develop to make that feasible. And then the owners must consent to having their site added to the UGB and annexed within a certain time period. So there are two properties that we are proposing for inclusion inside the UGB as part of that 75 net acres. There are some maps attached to your staff reports that identify those properties. Just going to go through those in a little bit more detail. So the first area is approximately 71 acres in size. It's part of a larger parcel located on Mistletoe Road, so just west of town. The current comprehensive plan is agricultural and it's zoned for exclusive farm use. That land is currently vacant and leased for agricultural use. In terms of natural resources, there is a seasonal unnamed creek that flows through the easterly portion of the property and then eventually connects with Middle Fork of Ash Creek. So that's approximately 0.7 acres of the property, which is well below that 25% threshold that I mentioned earlier that the bill allows. And then the property owners have agreed to annex. They've signed an annexation agreement that they would annex their property within 2 years and apply residential zoning to the property. So at the time of annexation, there'll have to be some additional planning that's done. And when the city zoning is placed on it, they'll need to do a wetland delineation study to identify if there's any further wetlands than just what are currently mapped through the National Wetland Inventory. Is a pretty coarse analysis. So there's usually some more site-specific wetlands that get identified, especially this being in the Willamette Valley. So upon annexation, the target would be to put it into the medium density residential category zoning wise, and we have a corresponding comprehensive plan map designation of medium density residential to implement that. In terms of area 2, this is a smaller parcel, a portion of which is already inside of our urban growth boundary. It's approximately 6.7 acres. It's located at 6685 Talmadge Road. The property has, in terms of environmental constraints, there is South Fork Ash Creek that flows along the southerly portion of the property. So this one has a bit more of the constraints with approximately 23% of the property falling within that flood wetland area of South Fork of Ash Creek. Luckily it's along the south portion of the property, so it kind of separates it from the buildable portion on the north. This parcel does have an existing house and some outbuildings on it, but there's a sizable piece of it as well that can be further divided. And Ash Creek Drive is actually adjacent to the property as well as Talmadge, so it has access to that area. The proposed comprehensive plan for this area 2 upon coming into the UGB is low density residential, and that's to largely match the existing zoning of the surrounding properties. In terms of the land that's proposed for removal, this is identified as map area 3 and exhibit 4 in your staff report. According to the House Bill criteria, that may not exceed 90 acres in size, must have more than 1/4 of its acreage within an area mapped for flood or wetlands. So again, trying to remove the land that has less buildability or buildable potential on it. And that's usually lands that are within those environmentally constrained areas. May not have been annexed to the city and must be designated for residential use on the city's comprehensive plan map, and it's not currently served by city sewer service. So the area that's been identified that meets these criteria is in the southwest portion of Monmouth that consists of 7 parcels. It's currently designated low density residential on our comprehensive plan map. There is the South Fork of Ash Creek that kind of flows through the middle of the subject property areas, which covers 28.4% of the property. So it's over that 25% threshold set by the bill. So moving a little bit into the process of the UGB land exchange, the first process is to go through this legislative amendment process with the city to apply the new map, comprehensive plan map designations that I'd mentioned to the properties coming in. Properties going out would then get a county plan and land use designations from Polk County. These types of decisions to amend our comprehensive plan map are what we call type 4 legislative actions. The council is the final decision maker for those decisions, and then the planning commission makes a recommendation after holding a public hearing. And the council holds a second public hearing, and then you make your decision by adopting an ordinance. And the criteria that the council will use for making that decision for a comprehensive plan map amendment, there's 4 of them. So basically you're looking at, is there a public need for the land use that's proposed, or if there have been changes in the surrounding neighborhood? Is the change consistent with the goals and policies of our comprehensive plan? Are there adequate public facilities and services, transportation networks in place to support that new plan map amendment? And is the proposed change appropriate considering the surrounding land uses and density and pattern of development in the area? So we'd be applying those once you have your public hearing and you make a decision. We'll have findings that would support each one of those to make a approval decision on the plan map designation. The Planning Commission is tentatively scheduled to hold that public hearing in January after we provide the required notice to the affected property owners and also inside the newspaper. Once the Planning Commission makes a decision, if they're able to do that on the same evening, then we would refer that to the council in February. And then upon the council's decision, then it would be the comprehensive plan map amendments would be forwarded to Polk County. Polk County Planning Commission and their Board of Commissioners go through a similar process at the city level that we went through to apply the appropriate plan map and zoning designations to those properties that are affected by it. So the House bill got us through a streamlined process, but there's still some process to make sure that we have the correct plan map designations on the property. It just expedited and simplified some of the criteria that we go through in doing a land swap. So I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. We will ask Suzanne a round of questions and I'll invite public comment and then we can follow up with Suzanne after that. So questions? Councillor Lopez and then Councillor Carey.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. We're all excited to see this come here today, and it feels like we're nearing the end of the tunnel of a very long road. I'm curious, in the report, you discussed pretty thoroughly the 2 tax lots that are being added potentially. But as I go down and look at the map for the area that's being removed, I count, I believe, 7 tax lots. And there is a little bit in the background about, the reasons that, these tax lots may not be appropriate to keep in the urban growth boundary. Could you speak a little bit to the communication that we've had of the owner or owners? I assume there's multiple owners with those tax lots. A little bit about the background of communication that we've had with those individuals.
Yeah, so I've spoken to one of the property owners about this several years ago, and with the idea of let's go through the traditional land UGB expansion process before, the adjustment process before we had the current House bill in place. And there was not any support for or being able to annex the property. So it was kind of like, are you interested in annexing and coming inside the city, since it is an eligible property for annexation and growth? And it came back very strongly that there was not an interest, that it was a kind of a family farm, had been in the family for a number of years, and that, there was no plans for being able to annex it. So I think that combined with the environmental constraints that we see pretty visibly with the floodplain shown in attachment 4 is the purple shaded area. The blue is more of the creek bed, the flood zone or floodway that goes with the property, that it's extremely challenging to be able to serve that property with transportation access, with sewer, with the grades of the property. So the circumstances could change in the future, and at which time, we would evaluate our land need. And so it's not saying this property could never come back into the UGB if the property owner changed their mind and wanted to develop, but in terms of readiness right now, and there are other properties that are closer to being able to break ground and develop. So.
Certainly. And then as a follow-up, just to confirm, 7 tax lots, but 1 property owner, correct?
There's actually 2 different property owners, is my understanding. I believe they are relatives as well. So, yeah.
And they both kind of shared the same sentiment? That they
I haven't been able to get a hold yet of the second property owner. So as part of this process, we'll be sending what's called a 35-day notice to the affected property owners with their contact information. And so we'll be able to have additional conversations at that point. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Councillor Carey.
Thanks for this, Suzanne. We'll be making, at the end of, assuming the Planning Commission approves, and then at the end of our the public hearing that the council holds, then we'll be at some point making a decision whether to accept these properties in and shoot the other one out. And that'll be one decision for both properties.
Correct.
Got it. And then following that, and will that be able to be appealed? If there's someone who doesn't want this to occur, could they appeal at that point to LUBA or whoever?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the land swap decision is not appealable to LUBA. I believe that the comprehensive plan map amendment could still be considered. I'll look into our attorney to see if he wants to weigh in here on that.
I believe that's right. Yes, the comprehensive plan amendment would be, it's just like any other comprehensive plan amendment that way, but the overall process, it's a statute. So does that answer your question?
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out where there might be some roadblocks or stumble points along the way, and making sure that we can do all we can to alleviate or at least be successful if something is appealed. So let's just move then. Let's assume that it is approved by the council. Then we've got a zoning issue to deal with, and that's dealt with, I thought I heard you say, in the city, because it's agricultural to moment, EFU, and we'll need to, in the one case, move that to medium density residential and the other low density residential. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's a little confusing. So we actually have 2 land use designations. We have a comprehensive plan map that's the 20-year plan map that guides the overall growth and development, and then that gets implemented by a city zoning that has specific uses and standards that's in our code. So right now, through this legislative amendment, all the city is considering is the appropriate 20-year or that comprehensive plan map designation. So we're not actually annexing the properties at the same time. We're just moving the UGB line and applying the appropriate comprehensive plan map designation. So the application of the city zones won't happen until the properties are annexed. So that's kind of a two-step process for that.
Good. And once again, because, and the thing that worries me a little bit, and it's down the road a ways, but if we've got something designated currently as exclusive farm use, and in zoned agriculture, there are those that are really, don't like that idea of pulling agricultural land, sort of off the market. So, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to dodge any kind of appeal that may come when that occurs. Because those four criteria that you laid out, I clearly support that. But I'm just I'm trying to shoot down potential problems, I guess.
Did you have something, Justin? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that in terms of the immediate process, I mean, Lane and Susanna pretty well smoothed the way with the drafting of the statute. So, there's a series of land use decisions that hypothetically could be appealed, but I think it's pretty well set up right now to do the immediate comprehensive plan amendment.
Councillor Oberst and then Councillor Ridgway.
My understanding from looking at this bill earlier was that we're okay to use EFU land because we have a number of cities in the state that are constrained to the point, and a previous bill was passed okaying the use of EFU land, and we couldn't avail ourselves of that, thus Bill 2647. And most of the way down page 1 of this bill, subsection 4, section 2, subsection 4 says, land may be removed from an urban growth boundary under this section without landowner consent. So that kind of greases the skids on appeals on that, I think. And is it saying that you don't have to be okay with it? Recognizing that, I think if you look at the big picture of land use, it's been extremely difficult to remove folks from the urban growth boundary. They might not have an interest in developing for 100 years, but once they're in, they're in. That opens the question of why was this parcel ever brought in the first place? And it wraps back around, John, to that EFU piece. When we did our last urban growth boundary expansion, we were so surrounded by EFU land that this was one of the only places we could go and not run afoul of the EFU piece, even though almost a third of this land is wetlands. So, this is a place where, I actually have had conversations with some folks from Thousand Friends in many years past about our situation, and that we are not unique in being in the valley and constrained in our ability to expand because we can't go into EFU, and if we don't go in EFU, then we're going into wetlands. And that this is something that's going to have to be dealt with. And I think we're finally there. I first started raising this issue when I got on the Planning Commission in 2004, 2003. So over 20 years ago, and it has taken this long to finally break through to something. So thank you, Suzanne.
And a huge team effort. So thank everybody that's been involved in that.
Yeah, I can remember again, I think I mentioned this, having a long conversation with Representative Evans in the Bi-Mart parking lot 10 years ago. And I think that conversation actually started this process very slowly to get us to where we are now. We, among other cities in the valley, kind of have no choice. If you want more housing, if you want to continue to grow, which we have to do because property tax limitations are a thing, then we're going to have to use EFU land eventually. And this is the first case of that. So that's all. Thanks. Thanks for letting me ramble too. I appreciate it.
Councillor Ridgway and then Councillor McKeel.
Thank you. Thank you for putting in all the work on this. This is seems like it's culminating in a lot of work that you put in, and I think it represents some intentional and smart growth planning for our city. It gives us an opportunity that we can use usable land and maybe offload some land that's not as usable. Couple questions. One's just to confirm what I think I understand. Two separate actions, one to do the actual land swap, and then separately, a later conversation would be regarding the zoning. Is that correct?
Yes, and I would just say the land swap, the planning action that you are working on at the same time as the UGB swap is the comprehensive plan map, applying that designation of this will be for future residential use. But yes, you're correct. There'll be a future planning application after the UGB swap has been approved and the plan map designation placed on it. The owners would then have to apply for annexation and zoning applied to the property. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is maybe just to educate me. I'm not as familiar with the process, but the proposed comprehensive plan map, is that, how do those designations develop for that plan? Is that something that the planning committee has worked on? Is it based on a certain formula? I'm looking at the density of housing and how that kind of came about.
Great question. Thanks for asking that. So ultimately, which comprehensive plan map designations to place on the property will need to meet those four criteria from our city code. So we, staff have been working on evaluating different the different planning and the different uses and the different zones and what's appropriate given what's inside of our city limits right now. And so, and also taking into account the surrounding land uses around these parcels. So the larger parcel that's proposed to come in, that 71 acre one on Mistletoe Road and Church Street, has the medium density residential designation, and that's to allow a slightly higher density than the low density zoning to make the most efficient use of that land. The medium density will promote more of the affordable housing type. So we've seen how challenging the rent and the mortgage prices are right now. And so that the medium density zone allows things like cottage cluster, duplex, triplex, townhomes. And so that can get at more of that workforce housing level affordability, and not just single detached units. So single detached actually still are allowed in that medium density zone, but they still have to meet that density criteria and so smaller lots generally for that. So because we're bringing in less land than we're removing, we want to make sure we're getting the most efficient use of that based on what we're seeing the needs right now with our housing. So, yeah.
Okay, and you said that was based on our city code, the breakdown or the ratio or the formula that's used to designate medium density versus high density or low density.
So it's our comprehensive plan lays out the forecast for the number of housing units and at what price points we need to hit in that. So it's actually comes more, I'd say, from the comprehensive plan. The zoning implements that in terms of saying what specific uses are allowed on those properties to meet those goals, those overarching goals and targets that are outlined in the comprehensive plan. But yeah, in terms of analyzing the land inventory and the types of housing units that are built and projecting those that are needed, that comes from our housing needs analysis and our comprehensive plan. Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor McKeel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was looking at Area 2 land, and I saw there's a large section that is a wetland. Is that going to stay there and they'll just build the houses around it? What's going to happen to that wetland there?
Yeah, great question, Counselor. Thanks for asking that. So it will depend on how that wetland gets classified through the when the property gets annexed and there's been a wetland delineation done, a site-specific one on that property. That boundary will likely change. It may get a little smaller, it may get a little bigger. And then as part of that wetland delineation study that the property owner pays for, there'll be an analysis of how these wetlands function and whether they're of a high enough value, meeting our criteria for full preservation. So the short answer is I don't know yet. That information will follow at the time of annexation and when the more detailed wetland study is done. I can say just generally the criteria that we use for making sure that wetlands don't get filled and they're preserved. They are usually tied to streams, fish-bearing streams, because they're providing habitat. They're providing flood protection. So the more kind of functions and values that they have associated with them, they're tied into larger wetland areas, then generally they get the larger protection on them. So we have other properties with wetlands near South Fork, and they have not been designated as locally significant that are inside the city UGB now. So it's just too soon to tell until that study is done, though.
It's helpful to know that the evaluation has to do with its functionality. So thank you.
There's a very specific state methodology that's been developed with wetland scientists to evaluate that. So we've got some good tools for that.
At this time, we do have public comments. I'm going to have Suzanne move aside a bit and have Brian Sparks join us. And I guess I already stated your name for the record if you want to state your residence. Red light is actually on, so press the little bar again.
It was already on. Thank you. My name is Brian Sparks. I live at 870 South College Street here in Monmouth. I own the property adjacent to the stump parcel that has been requested to be taken out of the urban growth boundary. I have a number of specific concerns that I'll address at planning regarding this proposal, but it is having attended or watched your 11:4 minutes of the presentation to council, and I attended the 11:18 Planning Commission meeting, which was similar in nature to your earlier meeting. I have a number of concerns. The biggest one is that there has been no process for other property owners to be made aware of the legislation and the action that was going to be taken regarding the urban growth boundary. So I'm aware of and have spoken with other property owners that said, well, geez, I'd like to have my property taken out, or I would have liked to have property considered for being put in. And at this point, while this has been a protracted, I'll use the term legal process, there's been really no public knowledge of it or the ability for property owners to participate. The fact that that's going on has affected me personally. I have requested for many years a revision to the Monmouth urban growth boundary for 2 acres of my property that was included in the UGB in the original process in the late 70s, early 80s. But in the adjudication process of adopting the Monmouth UGB at the county level, it was determined that one of the lines on the map that was developed through the public process was not a surveyed line, and Polk County would not accept that. And so an administrative decision was made that moved that line. Unfortunately, I relied on the maps that the city had, the county had, and state lands had that reflected that original line. So I have been requesting to get that renewed. In March of this year, I approached the planning department and the other city staff with a pre-application conference for a subdivision. Included in that was a specific request to again move that line back amounting to basically 2 acres to the original spot in order to have a large enough parcel to economically develop. The parcel itself could have had up to 6 acres of property with it. We were only asking for the 2 at that time. Having gone to the planning commission meeting and listened to the discussion about the general issue of taking 90 out and putting 75 in, there wasn't any discussion of 2 parcels to my recollection. I may be wrong, but I don't believe there was. And when I read your council package for tonight, I saw that there was a 6-acre parcel being considered. I was a little frustrated with that, having been told by planning in March that my request could not be considered because there wasn't going to be any change to the UGB. Reading this, I'm now more frustrated that staff did not recontact me about including all of my property, the 6 acres, or the 2 that I had requested, and that there was really no process for educating oneself about what was going on relative to this UGB issue. I've been on the planning commission. I was on the Soil and Water Conservation District. I've been dealing with wetland issues and property development issues on my property for some time. So I'm not the most ignorant person about any of these things. And I try to keep track for both myself and other adjacent property owners that call me up because I've been on planning commission and I'm familiar with the soil and water issues that are going on. So I hope my frustration is heard and that we can address those issues. The other thing that concerned me about the proposals is that we deal normally with parcels, not with other language that the lawyers have crafted in this legislation, talking about area and those types of things. We're looking to take parcels out or take area out and put area in that slice and dice existing parcels, some of which of specific tax lots or literally legally described parcels are in the city limits and are also adjacent to roadways that have sewer services in them. The fact that the property owner said, hey, I've got a community water system and a septic tank, I don't need to pay the city for that stuff, doesn't mean those services aren't there and available. And the size of the pieces of some of these 7 different parcels are in fact buildable. The property owners don't have to build on them, but the language in the bill has been carefully crafted to allow what's being proposed in terms of taking these properties out. It just seems to me to be contrary to our whole planning processes that we've undertaken. We've put the infrastructure in, we have sewer master plans, water master plans, street master plans, and all of those are now going to be thrown in a lurch. I've personally spent in excess of $10,000 on engineering changes to get current with the existing master plans, and nothing that was communicated to us following our pre-development conference said anything about this removal going on the other side. So now streets that we were going to put through are going to go 150 feet and dead end at the property line, and the property on the other side has no kind of planning horizon associated with them. So it isn't a light thing. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. I understand the desire to have some development property to kind of helps out with the budget process, having been on the budget committee for the city. Those new buildings with new tax valuation versus Measure 5 restricted property is one way to help keep up with the budget needs. But I'm really disappointed that having made a request for a UGB change within the time frame that this whole process has been underway, and that I was told no, and then not informed about that opportunity. The parcel that I wanted to include has 0 wetlands or other associated issues related to it versus this 6-acre parcel that has substantial wetland and floodway issues, and is also on the South Fork of Ash Creek, which in 2018 was designated enhanced salmonid habitat, the whole South Fork of Ash Creek. So there are a number of environmental issues related to that parcel that don't show up, I guess, on the maps that are called out to be looked at under this bill, but they're still existent on the ground. And while I think it's legal to do, it really raises in my mind the question of, is it the right thing to do? We're parsing pieces of some lots, and that could have been done with the 6-acre parcel, simply leave the wetland portion out. But that wasn't considered in terms of the proposal that you had before you tonight. So I'll address those issues further at Planning Commission level, but I thank you for hearing me tonight. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. All right, I'll have Suzanne back up if there are additional questions, either regarding the testimony. Well, not testimony, because this isn't a hearing yet, and Mr. Sparks will have an opportunity at the hearing process to also speak to those, but any questions for Suzanne? Councillor Carey, and then Councillor Ridgway, and then Councillor Lopez.
Suzanne, in partly in response to Mr. Sparks's comments, how did we select that parcel number 2, or area number 2, I guess it is? How did we select that one? Why was that one chosen?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for the ability to provide some additional context around that area too. This is the Talmadge Road parcel that's just over 6 acres. So I have been approached by that property owner as well in the past that needed to do some adjustment work on that parcel to be able to actually develop the piece that's inside of the UGB. Currently, a portion of their property abuts Ash Creek Drive, but the portion that's inside the UGB is not of sufficient depth and configuration to be able to put housing units on the other side of Ash Creek Drive. So you have a fully built street, I think with the exception of the sidewalk, water, sewer already existing built in Ash Creek Drive East. But because the part that's inside the UGB, they just kind of drew a line, aligned their parcels back in the 1970s, here it is, without taking some more of that analysis into play. So that parcel was really selected because it is, while it does have constraints on the south portion of the property, it still has a buildable rectangular, regular shaped parcel with full street access, frontage, that already has existing services. So these are low hanging fruit parcels that are ready to go. And that is why we got this bill approved for us as an exception, is because the legislature recognized our need is of such a critical nature just to get some land supply going now. It's not that this area that's being removed will be forever outside of the city. Again, that could change. UGBs are intended to be able to grow over time as the growth demands it, but it happens in a logical, orderly fashion in terms of being able to provide that infrastructure. And when the growth boundary was drawn in the 70s, they didn't have more detailed studies of being able to serve things and what would require pump stations and how to loop that water system and what those costs would be. Sure, you talk to an engineer and they can serve any property with utilities if you throw enough money at it. But we know in reality, as we see parcels just sit there vacant, that the costs do come into play. And that's what's further locked up some of that land supply. So.
Yeah, that makes good sense, and I don't quite understand why that line was drawn where it was drawn, but it is what it is. Again, and should the planning commission decide they didn't like that one and would prefer somewhere else to burn their 6 acres, is that possible, or is this developed in statute, these 2 properties specifically?
So the statute didn't identify specific parcels or parcel IDs or addresses. So in there, yes, as long as the parcels met the criteria, again, I think we need to look at it from ready to serve as quickly as possible. That's the goal, is to increase the housing production now. But yeah, in theory, there could be other properties besides these.
And again, those criteria, and maybe if you were to substitute other properties for these, we have to look at that table 1, which indicates not only the percent of property constraints, but the total net acres. We can't exceed 75 of total net developable acres. So gross property size is one thing, and that might be equal for equal, but it's the net acreage we have to stay within. So, Councillor Ridgway, then Councillor Lopez.
So you said that when this, I guess, proposal was sent to the legislature in hopes that they would approve it, there wasn't any specific data regarding which properties or owners or addresses. Did I understand that correctly? It was just here's an idea. Will you allow us to work with it?
Yeah, I think we knew conceptually that our land, there's only certain places Monmouth can grow, right? We've got Independence on our east border. We've got conservation easements and Ash Creek on the north side of us and South Fork on the south side of us. So really, we're talking about the west side of town of being able to make these adjustments. But again, the bill did not specifically call out specific properties in it.
So as long as we stay within the confines of the bill, if we were to identify other properties or make any adjustments to these areas, is that something that we legally could do and have voted on?
Yeah, I think as long as those criteria are met from both the bill that are outlined in the staff report and then our own comprehensive plan map criteria, then we have that flexibility of which properties are coming in and which properties are going out. Mm-hmm.
And final question, is there a process to entertain other new proposals or additions, subtractions, adjustments? Is that something that we can continue to see flex or change as this moves forward?
Yeah, I'd say that's one of the purposes of the public hearings is to be able to take public comment on the specific proposal. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Suzanne. I have a couple questions as well. Going to the net acreage versus the gross acreage. You mentioned that further or subsequent components of this process may better delineate what percentage of that acreage falls under wetlands, right? Some of that we think, some of that we don't know though. Is it possible that that net acreage figure could change as we learn more about the properties that we're considering?
It could, yeah, once we have more of the detailed wetland information available to us. I will say, knowing that the National Wetland Inventory is not 100% accurate, we do take a look at other information like soils, wetlands, so hydric soils that can be an indicator of wetlands. So, and the property owner is started doing some of the initial analysis as well for the larger mistletoe properties. So, yeah, but it's based on, you know, the information that we currently have now, which is the National Wetland Inventory, that is able to tell us at least, you know, the best information that we have at this point. Mhm.
So I think what I'm hearing is that we don't have a lot of wiggle room right now. We're at 74.77 total net acres. That might change a little bit, but it's unlikely to change significantly. We're not going to find out that 2 acres out of that 74 ish are impacted by wetlands that we didn't know about.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard
Unlikely.
question to answer specifically at this point, again, based on the information that we know. But yeah, there shouldn't be large swings in that in those acreage amounts, but more of smaller adjustments that are being made. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question is relating to properties that, and as I look at the map, it looks like in the areas to remove, it looks like there's one property that I can see that is would be kind of bisected by the proposed new UGB line. Other properties look like they run right up against it, but it looks like there's one property that's oh goodness, it is in the upper right hand corner, I guess, as I look at the handout.
Yes.
How is that handled? It seems odd to me that a UGB would go directly through the middle of a property.
Yeah, so currently that's following. So if you see, I don't know if you're looking at attachment 4, but the red dashed line is our city limits line. So that parcel already has a portion of it inside the city. So the UGB line would just move to where the city limits line. Those would be one and the same at this point. So unfortunately, we can't clean up all of the parcels that have the UGB line kind of splitting those up. It's actually fairly common to have parcels, because when we drew the growth boundary back in the 70s, it had to only it could only bring in enough land that met the need. We couldn't follow, and a lot of the farm acreages in particular are large parcels, so it did by necessity have to split up some of those.
And so if a parcel is split and the property owner wants to do something more with it in the future, what options exist for them? I guess, could they divide the parcel into 2 and then do something with the portion that is in the city? Or, I mean, I guess what I'm asking, a different way to ask this is, we have a parcel that's half in, half out of the city limits, and in the near future, maybe half in and half out of the UGB. And so does that by default mean the half that's in can't be effectively developed?
So the half that is in is still, I mean, it doesn't change. Like, it has its zoning already applied to it as low density residential, and so they still have the same rights. That's not changing. The portion of the property that's currently outside the city, but inside the UGB, with it moving outside in the UGB, then it would not be able to be annexed, and so they couldn't develop that at urban densities. But it's my understanding that that's not the owner's intent. The owner, while they can't split that particular tax lot that I believe you were looking up in the upper right-hand corner, they can do potentially lot line adjustments to reconfigure those parcels. I'm not a county planner, so kind of getting into uncharted territories with me being able to give you specific planning advice on that. But but it does severely limit any further development on it. It would likely have an EFU zone placed on it. But it'd be able to continue to be used for my understanding of what it's used for now, which is farming. So the actual use wouldn't change from what it's being used for today. That makes sense. Look at a lot of different, scenarios.
Thank you.
Councillor McKeel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Dufner, as we're looking at more property that could be considered for this in this land swap, did I understand correctly that Area 2 was an area that you designated here because of the development that's already there? So would the city development costs for water and sewer is already there, and so it made it easier to include that?
It definitely puts that property closer to what we call being shovel ready for being able to annex and then actually start development. Otherwise, so again, it's talking specifically about that Talmadge property because it does have the existing water and sewer inside Ash Creek Drive, which is improved except for the sidewalk on the south portion of the street. So yes, that is the goal, to be able to bring in land that is ready to go and be built on now in the short term versus having to do large, expensive bridge building projects or extending sewer lines for a long distance or making upgrades to those lines. Because again, that's going to be a significant development cost, and that cost is borne by development largely borne by development. So yeah, that is why that property was selected, because of those advantages that it has. Mm-hmm.
So it's not city costs, it'd be the developer's costs, and that, or is this, if I remember correctly, so I can be corrected, obviously, that when you're looking at developing an area, there are costs incurred by the city for getting in all of the things that you need to build homes, but that's not, it's just developer cost?
For residential properties, that is developer costs. We're looking specifically at, again, this Talmadge and Mistletoe properties. If there's properties inside of our urban growth boundary, inside of our urban renewal area, we may have other tools to be able to provide incentives for infrastructure development. But the only case that there would be some form of a city reimbursement or contribution, and my understanding is if they had to oversize, for example, a water or sewer line, or build a larger street than was required to serve that development. So unfortunately, you don't have our public works director to be able to answer that a little bit more specifically. But yeah, and generally speaking, the cost of extending the utilities to serve that site is borne by the developer. Mm-hmm.
Councillor Oberst.
I'm looking at the Talmadge Road property again, and from a developer's point of view, I've got a street built already that I can put houses on. I know that the sewer and water are there already. I'm going to have to put in a sidewalk. I'll have to build other additional streets, but I've got a series of lots there that are, eminently developable. And Chris, to your point about slicing off a piece, if you look at that parcel, the UGB sliced off such a narrow strip that they couldn't do anything with it. Whereas if you look at the parcel we're talking about removing in the southwest corner of town, that relocated UGB has sliced off a fairly deep portion that, should that single property owner or pair of property owners decide to push the property line north and have just a strip along Falls City Highway developable and to actually develop it, that would be advantageous to them too.
So looking at this in sort of a big picture way, I don't think we're hurting those property owners too much, the removal properties, because they can do some things with what they've got left should they choose to, although by all accounts, they will not choose to. And then the folks out on Talmadge Road are, who've had land they can't do anything with but would like to, are suddenly going to be in a position where not only can they, but a developer is probably going to be very intrigued by the opportunity to do something with that. So, you know, and while I look at Mr. Sparks' situation with 2 acres, that if there was some way that we could do something around that, I would be in favor of it. You know, it's going to be tough to work this out, push out the purple portion of the Talmadge Road and pick up part of Mr. Sparks. I don't know. And then we go slicing a property with the urban growth boundary again. So that might not be good either. I don't know what the answer is, but you know, there's all these different considerations when you look at this, and it's about a 20-arm scale that balances eventually, we hope.
I just pulled up the Polk GIS map. The current urban growth boundary on south of Falls City Highway cuts through at least 6 tax lots. Just FYI. So that's, yeah, Brian's not. That's how they worked, right? We drew a line and that's acreage. So anyway, just FYI, 6 different tax lots. Other questions for Suzanne? Do you need, since we now have maybe hearing some folks interested in giving input on changing up some of the areas, do you want us to give some guidance on that? What people would want to see going forward? Or is this the plan? We're taking the plan. Obers.
We've heard Mr. Sparks say he intends to be involved in this process going forward. And I think it would behoove us to look at his proposal and see if there's any way we can work with it and, you know, continue this process going forward.
I'm just wondering if there is a better point in time to consider that. If it's now, we want to give some guidance to that as an alternative, or if we want to wait to go through the actual hearing process.
I think Suzanne's the one who knows the process best, so I'll leave it to her.
Councillor Terry has it.
My suggestion would be that we start this at the Planning Commission. And if the Planning Commission if testimony is taken, then anyone with an interest of jumping in, and Brian is one who might be, there'll be information presented. The Planning Commission will review that. If there's traction there, that will come forward then to us. You know, I'd hate to jump over the top of the Planning Commission, I guess.
Yeah, and I was just going to comment that, you know, I'm happy to take a look at the area that Brian's talking about and see, you know, are there, how productive and how many units, you know, can be potentially served by that, and be able to respond, you know, back. I was taking notes when he was speaking, and so I did hear the concerns as well. I will just say, you know, based on the shape of the parcel, it is triangular in shape, and it does have agricultural use on both sides of it. I worry a little bit about that farming conflict. I mean, we do have farming conflicts in other areas, but if there's, again, trying to create more regular shaped parcels makes it easier to serve with streets and with water and sewer. But I mean, we could definitely, you know, take a look at that and see if there's something that makes sense for that.
Councillor Belts.
I also did just want to add in, typically I know our city staff is very communicative, and I'm a little concerned when the speaker had mentioned that he had spoken with his neighbors and felt that there wasn't a lot of communication. So perhaps just a second look at that, making sure that everybody is being communicated with, because perhaps maybe there is a way that some of these changes could be made if more of the people that are impacted by this know about it. But again, typically city staff is very communicative, so I'm surprised to hear that folks didn't know about this.
I think part of that is if this were a normal process, there is requirement and it's very specific. So how do you just say, gee, who might want to know about this in the whole world? And how are we going to communicate that? I mean, I like Brian said, he follows us. Not a lot of people know to read the packet and look, but it's also hard to say what could we have done? Who would we have told? And what? That's my perception of it.
No, I appreciate that definitely. And that was not intended as a criticism, just a question.
We're communicative because we have specifics. We know who to communicate with, and there's a prescribed way to communicate with them. And so.
Yeah, and I would just say, and knowing that we do have this public process that we are going through for the comprehensive plan amendment, it's hard to know at what point to ruffle everybody's feathers if the decisions, there's no proposal to respond to. It just kind of gets folks potentially worried or anxious about a lot of things that we don't know. So we have more clarity now that we have this bill. We've started this process. The goal is to have an expedited process to bring in a limited amount of land. So if this were the traditional process, we would have a lot more of that public process as we go through our comprehensive plan update and we look at different areas. But this is a very small targeted action to be able to meet our short-term supply. And so I think that's the differences kind of that you're seeing between those two procedures. So
Thank you for the clarifying. Thank you.
Yeah.
And truly, the legislature could have said no to all of this, and then we would have people concerned for nothing. So, all right. Any other observations? All right. Thank you. And thank you, Brian, for coming to us this evening. That brings me to the mayor's report. This evening, a couple of things. I want to, again, thank Suzanne, even though she's not listening now. Today, we had a really interesting session as part of the process, part of the grant process to do the feasibility study for the BIPOC-led food cooperative. And so there was a gathering of folks with sort of a facilitated discussion about what are some of the benefits, impacts, potential partnerships for this cooperative market. And I thought it was a great discussion, and that project really kind of gaining some momentum, although as usual, the scope can get really big and exciting and then be pared back. But that work is ongoing, thanks to that grant. And a really good reminder that this is a BIPOC-led process, but it is not a BIPOC exclusive process. So once they get a better idea of what is feasible, and they're really looking at our outreach even beyond Polk County to get different kinds of vendors and products. So it's very, very interesting. I also will report that since our last meeting, we had wonderful tree lighting. And so I think many folks were there, and thank goodness the early horrible weather during the day stopped. And so we had a beautiful event. And I think as we get to the city manager's report tonight, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about some other events that have been happening in town that haven't been quite so pleasant. So I've been spending a lot of time the last 10 days working through some of those. We'll have a little bit more conversation about that. So reports of boards and commissions. What's going on out there? Councilor Oberst and Councilor Lopez.
Tree Board had planned to plant 4 trees at the skate park on the first Saturday of the month, and that was postponed, and we were going to do it the second Saturday of the month when the interim locate was done, and it was determined that there were a lot more pipes in the ground there than we thought there were. And so that's temporarily on hold. I'll let you know after the meeting on Thursday where we're headed with our fall tree planting.
Yeah, right around Public Works, you'd think they'd know where those things are buried. All right, thank you, Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last time I presented an update regarding the Homeless Alliance, and I presented some fairly concerning news about national developments. I'm coming back with a little bit of a breather. So it's rare that we get good news these days, it seems sometimes, but in a surprise move, an hour before this was brought in front of District Court in Rhode Island, HUD revoked their notice of funding opportunity with their revised rules. So they were still rebuked by that court for their lack of consistency and this last minute change. What does this mean? It means that right now there is no NOFO, notice of funding opportunity, NOFO for short, out there. So all of the projected negative consequences for our local community, in theory, are off the table. That being said, HUD did make it clear that they reserve the right to be able to reissue the NOFO at any time. The best, I think, thought around this is that they are likely to reissue sometime in the spring with a more reasonable time frame to be able to roll out the NOFO through standard process with a due date sometime late spring, early summer. This is all very hypothetical, so I say this so that everyone keeps this on their radar, but knows that there is no extant threat to the locally served programs that are being funded with these federal funds currently. So, take a deep breath. Christmas miracle. Thank you.
Councilor Bell.
While I was unable to attend the Arts and Culture Commission meeting, they did meet. The things that they discussed of significance here is the rotating gallery. Hopefully all of you have had an opportunity to look at the Susie Marston exhibit. Some of her photos are on display out in the lobby. And then there will be different artists rotating in throughout the next year. They discussed the Tiny Art Show, which the big news is they're moving from a 5-inch by 5-inch maximum to a 6-inch by 6-inch tiny art maximum. So very significant change here. Things are getting bigger and better. It was also Phyllis's last meeting as the Arts and Culture staff liaison. So I understand they had a little event for her after. Again, I was sick that evening. I couldn't attend. Second meeting of note was today. The Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments Board of Directors met. And besides general adoption of a number of different policies and things associated with funding and budget and moving into the next year, they did adopt a minimum 2.7% increase in member dues, which is just there's another acronym, CIP or PICC or some anyway, it's 2.7. It's going to go up just a little bit. We did have election of officers, the new slate of officers who will be installed in March. That will be March the 5th at the annual dinner. I will be rotating out as the COG chair. Betsy Earls will be rotating in. Frank Lonergan, Mayor of Woodburn, will be the vice chair. Commissioner Kit Johnston will be the third person on the commission and the executive leadership. I will be then the immediate past chair. All of that will happen March the 5th at Western Oregon University. We have already received an invitation for that. However, probably people aren't paying that much attention, and we will address the invitation in January. Also, be on the lookout for the awards information that should be coming out as well. We love to recognize our peers and our colleagues for work well done. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Historic Commission meeting was on November 25th. I was flying at that time, so I also didn't make it. it would be great when tech allows you to do meetings in an airplane, or maybe not, I don't know. So the Historic Commission did welcome the newly appointed Commissioner, Sandy Tennant, and she comes with a lot of experience working on events and for nonprofit organizations. So welcome Commissioner Tennant. It'd be nice to have her on board. The commission also completed their annual officer election, and they approved Commissioner Amy Lemko Yaramillo as the chair and Commissioner Beth Dykstra as the vice chair. The meeting, they also talked about information and ideas from the annual Certified Local Government Workshop that Commissioner Dykstra attended. She shared information about a session about working with the tribes on archaeological preservation work. So we're looking forward to some upcoming projects in that. The commission also discussed plans to apply for an Oregon 250 grant in celebration of the 250th anniversary of the United States. And the commission will be looking for funding for a permanent historic display to house historic documents, photos, and artifacts at the City Hall. And beginning in January, Director Duffner is going to go off, and Assistant Director Carter Craig, Associate Planner Carter Craig will be the new staff liaison to the Historic Commission. So lots of changes there. And I also have a Transportation Commission report. The meeting was December 8th. I did join over Zoom, so tech was very helpful there. It was sunny in Phoenix at that time, so never mind, we'll go into the sunny part. So the Transportation Commission did discuss the issue that was brought up at the last council meeting about the dark crossway on Stadium Bypass and the request for a flashing crosswalk light. And currently, Stadium Drive has a number of crosswalks painted on the street, and then they have bumps where those crosswalks are, and there's chevrons painted at the bumps. And so there's lots of indication on the road that there's crosswalks. The posted speed limit is 20 miles per hour. So we decided in that conversation that Director Cooper would collect data on of road usage and meet with campus safety to see if they have other ideas for solutions. It was also suggested that, and I think that they were going to do this, is to provide some education reminders to students about walking across the street with dark clothing. Yes, so I have been reminded of that very thing. So the Transportation Commission also discussed this trolley survey, was actually very excited about the data. And like all good things that happen, they suggested maybe we should expand the service area. So keep that data coming. We're just going to continue to talk about making the trolley even better. There was the concern that the distance that people had to walk from their neighborhoods to the trolley might be keeping people from getting on the trolley. So anyway, they had lots of ideas for that. The Transportation Commission also supported putting up a barrier at the end of Craven. So you'll like that, Councilor Carey. And the Transportation Commission also is very active in the bike safety. They would like bike safety lessons to be part of the PE curriculum at Monmouth Elementary. And then actually not just having, a one-off class, but after the students have this class about bike safety, they want to kind of gauge the public interest in holding a day when students walk, bike, or roll to school. So how can we help kids, encourage kids to not take the family car, but use their own their own bodies to get to school. Yeah, the people power. Thank you. There you go. They also, so members of the Transportation Commission plan to meet with school administration early next year to talk about setting up this walk, bike, or roll event. We also found out that there's a misunderstanding that we have with folks who, there was somebody who noticed there was a 3-year-old riding a bike in the street. And when they talked to the mother about the bike, the kid riding the bike in the street, she said, oh, it's because they can't ride on the sidewalk. And it's a misunderstanding because the only place you can't do that technically is downtown. So it was suggested that we'd work on some communication about it's okay if your 3-year-old is on a bicycle on the street because when they're that young, they don't know bike safety well enough to be doing safe things. Also, Commissioner Love is going to get a copy of ODOT's Safety Action Plan, should be updated in June, and then we're going to review that. The next meeting is March 2nd at 7 p.m. Did I get it all? Okay, all right. Got approval.
I also have not given a MyNet report. We did meet in October. We're down to meeting actually every 2 months, and we will not be meeting in December. We will be meeting in January. But just a couple of points of interest. MyNet, of course, did pay the debt service on the bonds that we hold for them for December, but they also made the third of 14 promissory note payments, which will, when completed, pay off all of the old debt that the cities have paid on their behalf. So they are moving forward on not only paying the current outstanding annual debt, but catching up what has been paid in the past. So that continues to be really good news about MyNet. An interesting thing we always have heard, those of us who've been on MyNet board, is about they do monthly statistics on how many services were terminated, how many services were added, so that churn. There used to be significant churn in June and September because students. That is a negligible amount now. There is very little of that seasonal churn. So I thought that was particularly interesting. They don't exactly have details or thoughts about why that is, but when the numbers weren't higher in September, I'm like, hey, what's going on? What's the uptake rate in September? And they said, we just don't get that anymore. So, and one other thing of interest, the Oregon Lottery used CenturyLink for hookups. So if you had Oregon Lottery machines in your establishment, you had to have a CenturyLink line. AT&T acquired CenturyLink and basically said, we don't want to service these lines anymore. So, they can get some other kind of internet access. And so MyNet, of course, already provides other internet service to some of the establishments in our town that have lottery. And so they thought, gee, now they can get that service as well and potentially go to others and say, would you like to replace your CenturyLink service with what we've got going on? So anyway, other great stuff going on at MyNet. Not only their continued community engagement, but providing great service and making enough money to pay the cities back. So great news there. Any other board and commissions? So I will turn it over to the real city manager, Rochelle Roden.
Other city manager.
Yes, our pro tem city manager is probably super glad to say, even though he had to deal with some real stuff there and did a great job. We are happy to welcome back the healthy and rested.
Yes.
Rochelle Roden.
Thank you. Before I ask Isaiah to come up, Chief Haynes to come up and give an update on some recent happenings in our community, I wanted to first thank Isaiah for standing in as pro tem and doing such a fabulous job. I'd also like to thank the management team. Everyone pitched in and helped. And so I definitely appreciate the ability to take time off when I needed to. So thank you, Isaiah. If you would come up, please, and address the council, and he's going to give you an update on some current happenings within the community.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. There's has been discussed, I think, over the last few weeks. There's been a lot going on in the community, and I think today was a good opportunity to talk about some of those things and hopefully talk about the response, some of the facts surrounding these things, and kind of the best way, I guess, that we can move forward, together. So, kind of, I'm going to move backwards. I think to the third is the first thing we'll talk about, and there was, for everyone that doesn't know, I think everybody does. I did send a follow-up email, I think, to everybody, and I tried my best to keep it concise, but to explain some of the things that had happened in our response. And I've had some conversations, of course, with some of you too, but on the third, we had an individual that came to, or a group of individuals that came to Western's campus, which is a public space, and were expressing their opinions and views and First Amendment issues. And we received initially, the police received a call of, I think it came in as a suspicious activity type call. And we started responding before we had made contact with the individual. We actually made contact with campus public safety, and the public safety director just said, "Hey, we know what's going on. We're going to handle this, and we'll get in touch with you if we need to." And that was good. We didn't have all the details. We just knew that somebody was on campus, and there was starting to be some gathering of other people, and so we did not end up responding, but we started monitoring. And as this went on, I think the crowd grew, and there was a lot of, again, opinions and feelings about the things that were being said on campus. And that we started having more regular phone calls with the campus public safety director. There came a time during this where they were hoping that we could respond and remove the individual. These are tricky, as we talked about. These are First Amendment issues, and we talk about where people have the right to be, what is what they're allowed to do, and what legality, I guess, we have, and by way of enforcement, and even tactics. I mean, a lot of this comes down to the tactics that we employ. And it just so happened that this event was also live streamed. And so, as we were watching, we were able to see really, at least from the viewpoint of the particular individual, we were able to kind of see his actions and the things that were happening. And so when I think the first request was made that we come and remove the individual, we didn't feel that we had any legal ground to do so. And that was just based on that there was no visible crimes that were committed that we could enforce. We had, of course, two different viewpoints that were there, and people that were expressing those viewpoints. And again, a lot of feelings and emotions, but we did not have any criminal activity that we could respond to and remove this individual. And this kind of happened several times. We'd be getting regular updates, and I had a contingent of officers that were at the police department and around. We had some people that were viewing from a ways out, kind of monitoring. We had people in actually unmarked, cars that were driving through to observe. But one other point that I would make is that, we on scene, there was already a good sized group of campus public safety officers. There was faculty on scene. And so the school being government, there's already government, we'll just call them government officials for now, that were already on scene and to a certain extent managing the incident or the event. One of the things that I always want to make sure, again, is that we're making wise choices that are reasonable and that, more importantly, even that are lawful. At this point, everything was lawful. the last thing I wanted to do, even though it's a tough thing for sometimes for people to hear, but is for me to put my officers in a situation where they have to play, referee with people that are upset with each other when there hasn't been criminal activity that's taken place. We are watching, and if certain lines are crossed, there is an action that we're going to take. But in this case, there wasn't. But sometimes, by our response alone, that creates a spark or a point that escalates a situation. And so that was, one of the primary concerns, is that we didn't want to escalate something from into something that it didn't need to be. So as this went on, we were making active decisions throughout and having these conversations. Ultimately, several hours later, the individuals left campus, and we did not ever have to physically respond. You didn't see, squad cars there or uniformed police officers going to do that. And I will just publicly give kudos to, I think, faculty and staff from Western for the jobs that they did. I know it was very uncomfortable for them. But I will say that they managed, at least from my viewpoint, things very well. Trying to remove, I think, some of the students that were, again, upset, and to keep the situation as calm as they could. They did a really fantastic job, I think. I know that there was a lot of frustrations because when you don't see police and you have, again, uncomfortable situation happening, and you're like, well, we want the police to come, and you don't see them. I think there's questions that are happening, and hopefully, even though my deliveries may be clunky, I didn't have a written down report, but hopefully there's at least some understanding on why and how we made some of those decisions that we made, not to physically respond, but I guess what I would want to reiterate is that we were ready to respond should we need to. We had consulted with legal. We had consulted with other colleagues from other departments that deal with these things quite often. We talked about kind of the pros and cons of what we would do. But although the end, and I've said this to many of you, the end doesn't justify the means, I can still look at the events that happened and say that there were no bad arrests or false arrests. There were no uses of force, and there was no, national media attention, whether it be for the city of Monmouth or for the university. And I think that at the end of the day, those are kind of the results that you want to have. And I know that there was a lot of uncomfortableness in getting to that point, but I do think that others will disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. But I think that the right decisions were made at those times that enabled us to get to that spot. So I guess that's what I would have to report on at least that incident. And if there's questions about that, I would be happy to take those and talk about those at this point.
Thank you. And I just have a couple things to add. First of all, I completely support what they did. And I will let you all know that because of the concerns on the Western campus, I was found out that they were having 2 forums on campus. So the campus community was invited to attend one of 2 forums. That was on a Wednesday, I'm going to say. Tuesday or Wednesday, maybe Tuesday. The following Monday and Tuesday, anyway, they had forums for campus. Chief attended, and I attended, and we listened to these concerns. And many of the concerns, obviously, were directed at campus safety. Also, the general counsel, the attorney for the university, was speaking. But people did express concern about, here were some campus rules that were violated. Why weren't these people removed? And then in general, people were, saying things and doing things that maybe could have, in individuals' minds, merited a police response. We didn't speak. We listened. And afterwards had an opportunity, several people did come up and ask me questions, either folks that knew my position or were told I'm the mayor. But we did hear expressed, I feel better knowing the police were monitoring. And that is what folks said, right? Just hearing that they actually were prepared to respond did help some. So I think that's important. He was there, ready to listen. Also, the day after the incident, you did call the director of campus safety and spent time with him because he was expressing some frustration, right? So you want to talk about that too, that you met with Mike.
I think that's always really important, and thank you, Mayor. I meant to mention that, but by no means, even though I think that there were some things that went well, there's never a perfect response, and there's always lessons to be learned from everything that we do. And I recognized right away that there was going to be probably some unpopular decisions made from many. There's going to be a lot of, again, upset feelings and just maybe distaste for some of that. But one of the things that I reached out to the director of campus public safety and I invited him over, and he spent a good, half hour to an hour with us. And we talked about the whys, of what we actually had and why, again, we made these decisions and what could be better and how can we work together. I told them that I absolutely support, the university and their staff, and I want to have a unified response and approach to what we do over there. I think we have good relationships. I want to maintain those. It's really important, obviously, for me and my staff. And there's real relationships there. There's a lot of, crossover that does happen. So, again, I think that we left that meeting, and I'm sure that, I don't want to speak for him. I think he appreciated the meeting, and I'm sure that we still had difference of opinions, when we left there, and that's okay. But I think that what we just talked about that's really important is that we communicate through these things and that we learn from it, and hopefully that it's a Murphy's Law type situation. We know that these things can and will happen, and they will continue to do so. And so that hopefully our response is better, even moving forward. So that was the goal. Yeah.
So a couple other follow-up continues. We, I think, have agreed that it's a good idea to do a principals meeting, and not just the chief and the director of campus safety, maybe myself, Jesse, Peter's the president, Rochelle, but we also talked about engaging both attorneys because making sure that they understand when we're getting legal advice, why we are following our legal advice, they're getting legal advice at the same time. So I think we're going to try and get a meeting together in the next couple of weeks with all of us as a group, just again, to continue the communication and the response, because this will happen again. The individual who was doing the main live streaming even has indicated he will be back to this campus. So we want to be ready, and it's not going to be just this live streamer. There's going to be other incidents. So that's one piece of follow-up that we're going to do specific to that. I think the other thing, talking to Rochelle, talking to Chief, talking to Sabra, I think there was an interest from the campus community to hear more from the city. And I imagine if it wasn't winter break, they might have actually showed up tonight to let us know what they thought or what they expected from us. So we have a town hall scheduled for the end of January, the 29th, I believe. And we didn't have a topic for that. So I would propose that our topic be things about free speech, free expression, how we are managing these things, right? We hear complaints and concerns about other expressions in our community. And so I think it's probably a good time to talk through that. and to do a presentation. I've actually already spoken to somebody about facilitating that. We can get some framing on that. We'll work with the chief to do some presenting on how we are looking at these issues and perhaps have some legal advice there as well. So if that's okay with everybody, I think that's one way we will continue to address this. When asked directly at these forums by students and faculty, I did let them know that we would be addressing it as a city as well, because it is important. We've got to work together. We want this to be a safe place and a welcoming place. But we also want to make sure that our work is defensible. Questions about that? Yes, Councilor Ridgway.
I think I can speak for the council in just acknowledging that you have a hard job. And we appreciate the work that you do, and especially in challenging circumstances like this, that you balance being ready to respond and intervene if necessary, if there are crimes committed and there is a necessary response to occur, but also allowing people to exercise their First Amendment freedoms. Certainly is not the first time in this town's history that people have exercised their rights to speak and protest or make statements, and those rights have been protected. I'm sure it won't be the last time, and just appreciate the patience and the willingness to protect those rights that Monmouth Police offers. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. Go ahead, Councilor Lowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councilor Ridgway. I concur completely. I think you do speak for me when you say those things. I deeply appreciate the thoughtfulness and the intent that Monmouth PD held in that space. I recognize that once a line is crossed, especially when you're wearing a uniform and a badge, you can't undo that. And so monitoring and being careful and being ready to act, I think it's difficult to see in the moment. It's helpful to know that that's after the fact that's what occurred. I also want to thank you for the level of communication that you've held with us here tonight and in the past about these things. These are tricky topics, right? I also want to take a moment to just uphold and recognize the importance of the First Amendment. If we don't have the First Amendment, those freedoms of speech, the others don't really matter so much because we don't have that core protection. That being said, this feels a little different, and I'm not a legal expert. I'm not suggesting that there's a legal answer to this, but this is an outrage-based industrial complex. These are not individuals exercising their free speech for free speech. They're monetizing this. I went and watched the stream. This is not individuals within our community speaking up for their values. This is outreach for outreach's sake. And I don't mean to say this to suggest that you should have handled it any different, Chief. But I do believe that as a body, we need to recognize that this is not boilerplate free speech. This is not my neighbor coming up and saying and standing on the corner and saying, human rights matter. This is someone coming into our community to monetize outrage here in our community. And that is not okay. And I don't have the answer for that. I think it's going to take the community to come together to determine our answer for that. But that is not okay. I also appreciate that the city wants to, or the college and the student body want to hear more from the city. I want to hear more from the student body. And I'm heartened to hear that, and I support that January 29th town hall topic. I actually would have liked to attend that forum there. I think that's within Monmouth, and I don't know how to get on the right email lists out there, but
It was technically closed to the campus community. It wasn't an open meeting.
okay, fair enough.
So I may have not known that when I invited myself and the chief, but it turns out that was not an open meeting. They were focused on hearing from the campus.
Well, fair enough. Well, if anyone is from the colleges hearing this, just know that you have supporters here, and you have believers in what you're doing, and individuals who want to engage. And I count myself as one of them. This will happen again, and being proactive in terms of our response and our shared response, and the communication with the community ahead of time about what that response could look like, I think is going to be key. Because one thing that I do know is that as they're monetizing it, if they can find a way to continue monetizing it, it will continue happening and escalating. So we not only need to determine, it does not only behoove us to determine how we will address this successfully to keep our community safe, but how we will also address this in a manner in which it takes the winds out of their sails of monetization of outrage, not compromising free speech, just taking the wind away from the sails of monetization of outrage. Thank you. I've got a lot to think about, and I really appreciate the partnership and discussion.
Councillor McHugh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, I was in touch with one of the faculty who was there monitoring it during that evening.
And just, there were multiple senior administrators there as well. And as was pointed out, they had been on the Portland State campus the day before, and the provost was not there, the deans were not there, executive vice presidents were not there, the police chief of Portland was not monitoring the activity. So that campus was really, they are reminding folks that there was a lot of engagement in this. So that was just kind of an interesting side note. But
yeah, I think a lot of people did very well in a very difficult situation. And I think one of the groups of people we have not heard yet that have done really well, and this faculty was saying he was really proud of the Western students. This was obviously set up to bait them. There was very hurtful things that were said. And I mean, there were people who did get pretty upset. I think there were words said, but for the most part, our Western students really held the line and did a great job. So I appreciate, and we have great students.
that's Councillor Open.
So I have to go slightly aside here and note that my father was very involved in civil rights in the South in the early 60s. Very involved. When I was in high school, there was a case of a Ku Klux Klan group that wanted to march into town, and a court case wrapped around that. And to my utter surprise, my father filed an amicus brief in favor of allowing these folks to march. And I was gobsmacked, and I asked him, what was that? And he said, sometimes the best thing you can do with folks like this and with a bully is to shine a light on them and let people see, because most people will be repelled. His audience will not be, but everyone else will. That really, I got it. I really got that. And Chris, how do you deal with somebody who monetizes outrage? You ignore him. And it's extremely difficult to say to a group of 18 to 22-year-olds, when this guy is standing here yelling at you and telling you things that are designed to upset you, walk past him and do not engage. He won't be back. if we can get through to the student body, and this is an extremely tough thing, I don't know how you do this, but if there's any way to just say, just ignore him, walk by, and if he's not getting the engagement, he's not getting the clicks, and he's not getting the money out of it, he won't be back. You know, from my experience with my dad and the Ku Klux Klan thing, and seeing other bullies hate to be ignored, but when you ignore them, they go find somebody else to bully. So, and Chief, you ignoring him is, in a way, that you didn't ignore, but you didn't engage him in what he wanted you to engage. He wanted to be arrested, probably, because that'd be great stuff to have on the internet. And your restraint in not doing that did this entire community a favor. I don't know how to get it across to the student body, but if we can in any way, just ignore the guy if he shows up again. Walk past him. Just walk past him, turn your back on him. Nothing's going to make him madder faster. And
Yeah, it was hard hearing them, and we'll probably hear from them. They just want to. Their intent was to say this isn't welcome here, and yet it continued for 4 hours.
Oh, yeah.
And so
No, it would take great restraint on my part to walk by this guy and not engage him. I can't imagine young people and the passion that they hold their beliefs with, being able to walk by something like that and not engage it. But if they can, it's going to do everybody a favor, the same favor that Chief, you and your squad did for the entire community. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And my other observation, which I am sharing with folks, is a reminder that our what I am very proud of in our department is that they roll up to every situation they possibly can, giving the individuals the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes they can't, but they have to give individuals the benefit of the doubt. They have become very good at that. They work towards that. That is the philosophy that our chief is instilling in his people. And when they roll up on me, I want that benefit of the doubt. I want that grace. And when I call them because I'm concerned about somebody else and I don't want that person to have the benefit of the doubt, that's not their job. Their job is to roll up and decide and think that through and use their experience and their training to work through that. And that's what I'm really proud of them for doing. In this case, not rolling up at all, but knowing that if they had, they still would be impartial, neutral, and figuring out where to be able to give that grace. So thank you. And thank you, Justin. He was on call, right? He's like, God, why did I take this city job again? What the heck? I'm supposed to answer land use questions. First Amendment questions on the fly.
The land use questions are harder.
Thank you. And so anyway, other questions, other thoughts as we formulate this town hall, we'll appreciate those. And Councillor Carey.
I was going to comment just on that, and that, you know, the monetization thing gets to a certain population demographic. There are a lot of other antagonizers out there, pot stirrers out there that don't do any of that. And so I think that it's important that we educate our community the best we can in the things that you're talking about. What's protected speech, time, place, and manner demonstrations, because that'll always be pressed. And I think that the more educated we can have the more education we provide, the more people, the more chance we have of avoiding any sort of a significant deal. Now, fortunately, we've got a chief and a staff that believes in deconfliction and stay away from things, but be ready to pounce if need be. But I think a key thing is going to be educating our population so they can respond to that, because it might happen on the street corner down by Mart or whatever. You don't know. So we got to be ready for it. It's just a world we live in. So anyway, thanks for planning and doing all of that.
All right, we'll let you out of the hot seat and take any other council comments or announcements for the evening.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Councilor Open.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When Chief came up a moment ago, I, for a moment, actually, I thought that we were going to be talking about something else. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about it now. It's just in the view of suggesting that we have a continued conversation in the future. There's been an increase in reports of ICE activity here in our community, and a number of verified instances of ICE activity here in at least the greater Monmouth Independence, 2C1C area. I find this highly disturbing. I have neighbors asking me about it, and community members becoming more vocal about it. I think it behooves us as a council and as a city to hold discussions on where we stand on this. And I recognize that there are some implicit things, that we have stated as values and policies. But I believe that we need to be a little bit more precise to the current issue of unidentified masked individuals taking people away from our community, and find a way to address that as a council. And so I would just welcome everyone here to join me in those discussions another night. I think we've had a lot of focused discussion regarding this incident that occurred on campus. I would like to have, at the very minimum, a similar focused discussion regarding some of the atrocities that are occurring, that are beginning to reach into our community based on ICE activity. Thank you.
And actually, there's been some discussion about that as sort of another potential for that same town hall, right? To talk about public response to these things, because there are a lot of questions and concerns, obviously. Other comments or announcements?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just have to say thank you, Councilor Lopez, because we have so many families, so many children who go to school and worry while they're in school. And it's just, that's just not what we should be doing with our families and our children. So, but I would like to read the land acknowledgement. Councilor Lopez, you are always so much more articulate than I am. I have to write it down to get as articulate. So thank you. We would like to acknowledge that Indigenous tribes and bands have been on the lands here and throughout Oregon since time immemorial. It is not lost on us that the Willamette Treaty forcibly removed these peoples from their homelands in 1855 to 1856, the year that the city of Monmouth was founded. We recognize the pre-existing and continued sovereignty of the federally recognized tribes that are a vibrant part of this region today. The Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, and thank them for sharing their perspective on how we might care for one another and the land so that it can take care of us. We commit to engaging in a respectful and successful partnership as stewards of these lands.
I would entertain, Councilor Ridgway.
Thank you. I appreciate the reading of the land acknowledgement. I composed a a supplement to that. I think that also embodies Monmouth and our heritage. And so I'd like to acknowledge the heritage of Monmouth, Oregon, a community whose roots were established by settlers who journeyed westward from Monmouth, Illinois, as early as the 1840s. These pioneers carried with them a vision of faith, education, and civic life rooted in their values. In establishing Monmouth University in 1856 and later Christian College, they sought to create a center of teaching and learning that would nurture both intellectual growth and moral character to be shared throughout the West. Their efforts reflected a broader commitment to spreading the institutions and traditions of Western civilization, the fruits of which we enjoy to this day, while laying the foundation of a town that would continue to value education, community, and shared purpose. Today, Monmouth honors this legacy by recognizing the courage, determination, and vision of its founders. Their contributions remain woven into the identity of the city, reminding us of the enduring importance of education, faith, and community in shaping our collective future. Thank you.
Thank you. A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor McKeel. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Happy holidays. Take your cookies, and we'll see you in the new year.